In 2008, an 18-year-old Chinese girl is about to set out on the adventure of a lifetime. Ever since she was a little girl, she always wanted to live in Australia. It was something about living in a big city near the beach that captivated her young imagination. That mix of modern tall skyscrapers and the beautiful nature, the beaches and the bush. But for Ki Yu, the move was going to be difficult because she was an only child, a product of China's one-child policy. She had a very strong attachment to her mother, and likewise, her mother had a very strong attachment to her. So this was not an easy decision for her to make. All of her ducks were in a row. She spoke exceptional English as it's a compulsory subject in China's schooling systems. She had applied for and been accepted in Australia's International Student Pathway, landing a spot at the coveted University in New South Wales, one of the top universities in the world. And it's not like she'd be alone. Over 1 million Chinese students a year study abroad. It's almost like a coming of age thing for young Chinese people. And Sydney, the place she wanted to call home, has a very strong Chinese community. A Chinese community that she was already tapped into the social pipeline of, who were going to help her with accommodation and employment. So everything at this point is set up for her to realize her dream. So she boards a flight and she leaves China. When she arrives, she goes by the name Kathy. It's something that's common in the Asian communities living abroad. They westernize their names to, I guess, make it easier for pronunciation for English speakers and to assimilate more into the community. But from here, things for Kathy would go great. Over the years, she would develop strong friendships within the Chinese community. She completes 2 degrees at university, electrical engineering and telecommunications. And when she finishes her studies, she lands this great job in quantum technologies, which covers things like supercomputers and ultra-sensitive data transfers. It's a huge deal. She would be working in the research department. So her job essentially is to create the parameters in which tests can be run on these secure network systems. And if they don't pass the tests, well, the developers have to go back and change whatever needs to be changed in order for the software to get the tick of approval. Now, by 2018, Kathy had been living in Australia for 10 years. She's done it. She's effectively living her dream. She has a late model 2016 Toyota Corolla. She rents this large 3-bedroom, 2-story townhouse in Campsie, which is like a hop, skip, and a jump from Sydney CBD. And she does give back to the Chinese community who helped her out so much when she first arrived in the country. She rents the other 2 rooms out in her townhouse to Chinese students looking for accommodation. One renter is a woman in her early 20s named Jianing Wu, and the other is a 19-year-old Chinese man named Shuo Dong. Although Kathy has been living in Australia for such a long time, she is still super close to her mother. They speak every day, sometimes for hours at a time, about everything: life, family, friends, future plans, career, things mothers and daughters talk about. These 2 didn't keep secrets from one another. But everything would change on June 8th, 2018. It's just after 7 p.m. and Kathy is talking to her mother on the social media app WeChat, which is China's version of WhatsApp. It's a Friday night and she's telling her mother all about her past week and what she's planning on cooking for dinner when all of a sudden the lights in the unit all go out. Kathy, upstairs in her bedroom, walks over to the window and looks out, and she can see that the lights everywhere else are still on, and she's communicating this to her mother. She's like, I'm going to go downstairs and see what's going on. But before Kathy can get to her bedroom door, her mother on the other end hears a man shouting and the phone goes dead. She thinks the shouting may have been in Mandarin, but again, she's not 100% sure. As the minutes go by without Kathy responding to her mother's texts and phone calls, she's starting to get worried. She reaches out to Jianing Wu, the other roommate, but she's out with friends. Kathy's mother doesn't have Xiao's phone number as he just recently moved in. So her only option is to contact another Chinese man who lives in the same block of townhouses as Kathy. When she calls him, he does confirm that the lights are on here, but I'm going to go over to Kathy's place and see what's going on. The neighbor, who we will call Sam, walks over to Kathy's apartment, and sure enough, he does see that the lights are all out. He knocks on the door while Kathy's mother is still on the phone with him and she can hear everything. After several knocks, Kathy's flatmate Xiao answers the door. He can see the neighbor Sam standing there with the phone in his hand. Sam, looking at Xiao in complete darkness, asks him why the lights are out and where Kathy is. Xiao tells him he doesn't know why the lights are out and Kathy apparently went out to dinner with friends. Kathy's mother, upon hearing this, finds it a little odd, but she does accept the fact that maybe Kathy did just go out with friends. It is possible. And she thinks, well, I'll just talk to her later on because even though China is a 9-hour flight away, they're only 2 hours behind. So if Kathy got home at, say, 11 p.m., well, it's only 9 p.m. back in China. So Kathy's mother figures, okay, I'll talk to her when she gets home. Before the neighbor Sam leaves, he offers Xiao a hand with finding out what's going on with the lights, and Xiao reluctantly agrees. Inside, Sam walks to the kitchen and he finds the fuse box and he opens it up and he finds that the main fuse switch had been turned off. Now, this can happen for a couple of reasons. One is the circuit can be overloaded with too many appliances going at once, and the circuit protector just trips to make sure nothing burns out. Second to that, it can be turned off manually. So Sam turns it back on, and sure enough, all the lights come back on. A few hours would go by when Kathy's roommate Jianning would arrive home. The apartment is completely empty. She goes upstairs to see if Kathy's in, but finds that she's not. She communicates this to Kathy's mother, who by now is extremely worried. This is not like Kathy to be out this late, and not like her not to return her mother's calls. What's going on? But all the signs do lead to the fact that Kathy may just be out because her car is not in the driveway. So, Jianning Wu decides, well, I'm going to go to bed, and by the time I wake up, Kathy will probably be home, and this will be something that I guess we all talk about in the future. Like, wow, you need to be a little bit more responsible, Kathy. But unfortunately, Jianning was wrong. When she woke up the next morning, there were several panicked text messages from Kathy's mother. She still hadn't heard from her. So Jianning gets up out of bed and she walks over to Kathy's bedroom, knocks on the door. There's still no answer. She opens the door and looks in, and Kathy's still not there. But this time, in daylight and her not being tired, she starts to notice a few other things. The room is a mess. There's clothes everywhere. It looks like furniture had been bumped out of place. This is not like Kathy. Kathy was very particular. Everything had a place, and she would never leave her room like this. Jianning is now heading downstairs, and it's while she's walking downstairs that she notices what looks to be blood on the carpeted staircase. And by now, the neighbor Sam is coming back over because he's been alerted to the fact that Kathy still isn't home. As Jianning gets to the bottom of the stairs, she goes to the front door and opens it, and Sam walks inside. Jianning straight away tells Sam about what she thinks might be blood on the staircase, and he goes over to investigate it. While he does that, Kathy walks around the apartment and finds herself in the kitchen, where she can smell this overwhelming aroma of bleach. She communicates this to Sam, who comes over and he's like, well, I was in the kitchen last night turning the fuse back on, and it wasn't like this. So somebody's cleaned the kitchen floor clinically like this from the time I left last night to now. So Jianning and Sam both now go over to Xiao's bedroom door and they knock on it. And after several minutes, Xiao comes over and he looks really tired. He looks like he hasn't slept. And they're asking him, like, where's Kathy? Do you know where Kathy is? And again, he says, she went out last night with friends. I've got no idea where she is. And that's really all he says to them. And then he says, look, I want to go back to sleep. I'll catch you guys later. And he goes back to bed. By now, Jianning, Sam, and Kathy's mother are very, very worried. And they decide it is time to call the police. Now, in Australia, there is no time limit where you have to wait before you can report a person missing. If the situation is very much out of character or it's a vulnerable person, the police will investigate it immediately. So, a short time later, officers from the Campsie police station arrive to the apartment and they start looking around. Jianning and Sam are telling the officers about the kitchen and how it's not normally clean like this and how there's a blood stain on the carpet. And what about Kathy's room? She never leaves a room like this. She never does this. She never goes anywhere and just doesn't tell anybody. So the officers take down their statements and they leave. They're going to pass this on to detectives. A day goes by and Kathy is still nowhere to be found. And by now, Xiao has moved out. He's living somewhere else. Detectives now arrive to the home and they're speaking to Jianning and Sam. Again, they go over the details on what happened on the Friday night that Kathy disappeared. Police now have to locate Xiao as he was the last person to see Kathy. Members of the Chinese community would get together and they would find out where Xiao was staying. He was staying with a friend close by. When police would interview him at his home, he appeared to be afraid and he was dodging questions, and sometimes he just wasn't answering altogether. And as police are taking notes and trying to talk to him, all of a sudden, he just falls to the floor. His arms go really stiff and his legs go really stiff and his jaws is locked into place and he's shaking. He's convulsing on the floor, and the police are looking at him like, what is going on? They quickly realize that Shuo Dong is having a seizure, so they call an ambulance and he is immediately raced off to the hospital. Detectives are left dumbfounded by what they just saw, but they've got a job to do. They got to continue to investigate this missing person. So they put out a be on the lookout for Kathy's 2016 Toyota Corolla, and they get a hit. It's parked in a parking lot at Burwood train station, only 4 kilometers away from where she lived. They review the CCTV footage in the area and they see a man parking the car there who looks a lot like Shuo Dong. They now have probable cause to get a warrant to inspect his laptop and his mobile phone. In the hospital, doctors are running tests on Xiao. They can't work out why he had the seizure. All of his levels look normal, but doctors do agree that we should keep him overnight to just observe him. Kathy's parents by now have both arrived in Australia and they're distributing flyers amongst the Chinese community to try and locate their daughter. The flyers have a picture of Kathy on it and a phone number to contact if they have any information. The detectives are combing through Xiao's laptop when they discover some disturbing searches that he did 2 nights before Kathy went missing. In the browser, he would Google search sentences for murder in Australia, and he would inquire about extradition back to China for crimes committed in Australia. In his phone, they would discover that he was Google mapping bushland in the Ku-ring-gai National Park area, a 45-minute drive from Campsie over the Harbour Bridge. In fact, they would further discover that in the Google Maps app, he had mapped his way back at 10:30 p.m. from Ku-ring-gai railway station back to Campsie. And detectives could tell that Xiao was travelling in a motor vehicle, and more alarmingly, he didn't own a car. So when Xiao was released from hospital, he was quickly arrested and taken downtown to be interviewed. While all of this is going on, search parties had been set up in the Ku-ring-gai National Park area. They had over 200 volunteers from the Chinese community. With the data retrieved from Xiao's Google searches, they narrowed the spot down to being roughly around the Ku-ring-gai railway station. Search parties would fan out in a 360 radius from there. In the police station, Shuo Dong wasn't helping detectives with their inquiries. In fact, the more evidence they produced of his involvement, like the CCTV footage in his searches, the quieter he got. The only statement he would give was that he has no idea what happened to Kathy and he wasn't involved. Police are now diving deep into Shuo Dong's background when they discover that he was raised in a boarding school in rural China where some unspeakable acts happened to him as a young boy at the hands of some of the teachers. Before arriving in Australia, he had several visits with mental health professionals who diagnosed him with schizophrenia. The other flatmate, Jianing, would tell officers that Xiao had only lived with them for the past 3 weeks, and one of the stipulations for when he moved in was that he wasn't allowed in the upstairs area where the 2 girls' bedrooms were. But as soon as Xiao moved in, he started having problems with Kathy. Apparently, Xiao wanted to move out almost as soon as he moved in, but he wanted the 2 weeks' rent that he paid in advance given back to him. Kathy didn't have a problem with this, and Xiao was set to move out on the Saturday, the 9th, the day after Kathy would go missing. But at some point, Xiao would let slip that he was on a tourist visa, he was working illegally in the construction industry, and his student visa had been declined by the Australian immigration. It's believed that Kathy, in the days leading up to a disappearance, was communicating the situation Xiao was in to a mother when Xiao overheard it. The working theory detectives had was that Xiao wanted to eliminate Ki Yu as a witness because he wanted to overstay his visa and he was worried that she might dob him into the immigration department. But for the theory to work, they needed to find Kathy. 6 weeks after Kathy had gone missing, a body would be found wrapped in a bedsheet in the Ku-ring-gai National Park area. Forensics would determine that it was 28-year-old Ki Yu, but they couldn't establish a cause of death due to the advanced decomposition of her body. She was found roughly 150 meters from Ku-ring-gai railway station, the last point Shuo Dong's phone pinged. Around her neck was a business shirt. They could see that her face and head had been damaged by something. Although they couldn't determine exactly what caused her death, they had a fair idea. On the night it all went down, Kathy was upstairs in her room talking to her mother on WeChat. It's just after 7 p.m. and Shuo Dong is downstairs and he's planning his attack on her. And this is a plan that he'd been fantasizing for weeks now. The other flatmate, Jianing Wu, is out of the house and he's moving out tomorrow, so he knows he needs to act now if he wants to get this done. And it is the perfect opportunity. It really is now or never. He goes into the kitchen and he opens up the electrical box and switches off the fuse. That cuts the power to the entire apartment. As Kathy is communicating this to her mother, Xiao is walking up the stairs towards her bedroom. Kathy doesn't know this, but she's only got minutes to live. As she's preparing to go downstairs to see what's going on, her bedroom door flies open and it's Xiao. As he grabs her, he's yelling at her and her phone disconnects. He throws her around the bedroom and she strikes her head, and then he grabs a business shirt off her bed and he strangles her with it. Now, strangulation is not a quick act. And with a business shirt, she may have been conscious for anywhere up to a minute. And then after she passes out, he's got to hold that on there for a minimum of 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes before she's dead. So at some point, she's limp and he's still maintaining the pressure of the business shirt around her neck. At some point, the neighbor Sam knocks on the door and Xiao has to go downstairs and deal with that situation. After he gets rid of the neighbor, he heads back upstairs and now he's got to deal with Kathy's body. He grabs her body and he drags it down the stairs, and we know her head is bleeding and she leaves a blood stain on the carpet that Xiao doesn't see. He drags her body into the kitchen, where he's now preparing her to transport her somewhere else. In the kitchen, he wraps her body in a bed sheet, then he looks out the window and he waits for the coast to be clear, and he carries her body and he puts it in the boot of her own car. From here, Xiao goes back inside and he cleans up the blood in the kitchen with bleach. He's Google mapping the Ku-ring-gai National Park area and he's wondering where he's going to drop her body. When he arrives there, he finds a walking bridge that goes over the bushland. He walks her body out to the middle of it and he looks down to the deepest, darkest spot and he tosses her body over the railing, watching her fall in the complete darkness. Next to her body, they would find her broken mobile phone. The court case was relatively quick, as he would plead guilty and save everybody from a drawn-out trial. He would be sentenced to 18 years in prison. He never gave a reason as to why he did it. Mental health experts think that he may have been having a schizophrenic episode where the media think that Kathy wasn't going to give back the money and this is why it happened. Kathy's family, however, believe that Xiao just wanted to stay in Australia and he didn't care if he was going to be in jail the rest of his life. He just didn't want to go back to China. What I think, though, I think that Xiao was jealous of Kathy. She really made it. She made a life for herself. She was living her dream. She became a pillar within the Chinese community. She had this amazing job and these 2 degrees under her belt and this new car and this beautiful 2-story townhouse apartment. He wanted to strip her of her accomplishment. He knew it was never going to happen for him and he hated seeing somebody else succeed. I think it's as simple as that. The scary nature of a human being with violent tendencies who doesn't get what they want, lashing out at those they perceive are undeserving of it. And that's where Ki Yu's story ends. Stay safe out there in internet land.